Racist trope. The black brute seeks the innocent white woman, now I'm seeking lasciviously.
I can't believe the media is actually defending this dude, but here we are in 2024. The View defends a woke grifter who got exposed for being a total hypocrite. Kamala doubles down on a radical old position, and another insane TikTok. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and across our politics, all from an independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around. And regardless, do hit that like button as we go along to reward my suffering through all the stupidity. And do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely read it on the next show. So up first today, we've got to talk about one of the craziest media scandals I've ever seen. A woke professor and CNN guest, Eric Dyson, called a Republican congresswoman a racist, essentially on TV, and then afterwards hit on her. And now the media is covering up for him, and he's arguing that he's being unfairly canceled and victimized. It's one of the craziest stories I've seen in a long time in this industry, and that's saying something. So we actually covered this incident a while back on the podcast, but essentially it all originates from an incident that happened on air on CNN a few weeks back, where Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace said on CNN on a panel that she said Kamala instead of Kamala, and then she said, I don't care how to pronounce it, I'll say it however I want. Then another panelist, Eric Dyson, this professor and left-wing academic, accused her essentially, he didn't say it outright, but he implied that she was being racist, and then afterwards publicly did post that she was racist. And they had a little spat that I talked about on the show, but just as a refresher, let's look at that clip.
That's the history and legacy of white disregard for the humanity of black people.
Oh, so now you're calling me racist.
I didn't say, I just said you weren't a racist.
That is complete
You don't have to intend racism to accomplish
you are intending that
Your
I'm
disrespect
racist,
of Kamala Harris is part and parcel of a tradition disrespect.
It's offensive,
Congresswoman. Why can't you just?
I'm not calling you a racist. I'm telling you what the practice is racist.
You are. You absolutely are.
Let me
disrespecting. No, what's disgusting is your disrespect of her.
Professor,
this gentleman said, I didn't know her name. He's trying to do it.
Is her disrespect of women. She doesn't know what a woman is. And if 25 years ago,
white women don't have the ability to tell black women who paid the price of blood to make this country what it is, to tell them they're not real women.
So I actually said at the time that I thought it was dumb for Nancy Mace to argue that she can say her name however she wants, and I'm fine with mispronouncing Kamala as Kamala. I think you should just be polite and just say people's names correctly. But I thought the racism theatrics were very over the top, and this guy was really taking it to the nth degree and kind of ridiculously so. But apparently it was all for show. It was all completely fake, because after, not before, not at another incident, after this very segment, this same dude apparently begged the congresswoman to take a picture with him and then sent her flirty text messages, which she then later entered into the congressional record.
I'd like to also enter into the record a screenshot of a text message I received from the esteemed professor from Vanderbilt, Eric Dyson, after my CNN interview, begged me for photos. In this text, he says, after calling me racist on CNN, shh, don't tell anybody, we look good together, and sent me a kissy emoji.
Without objection.
Then the guy says I'm gorgeous in all these photos. I don't think he's that bent out of shape on how anyone pronounces Kamala.
So she ate him up. She exposed him. She brought the receipts and she read him for filth because he got all up in arms about how racist and evil she was being on CNN, all dramatically so. And then afterwards was basically hitting on her pretty clearly if you look at these text messages, and regardless was being very friendly. So it suggests that it's all an act. It's all a sham. He's a woke grifter, right? He's just playing up for the audience. He doesn't actually believe the things he's saying, at least not to the extent that he's taking them. So that was that, you thought, right? This was all, she entered these last week. I thought this story was done. But no, Eric Michael Dyson went on The View this week, and not only did he defend his actions, and he actually suggested that he was the real victim here, blaming cancel culture and racism for the scrutiny that he's come over, given his inconsistency. You really can't make this shit up, so I'm just going to show it to you, and you can see for yourself how he actually seemed to defend this, and the hosts at The View actually seemed to go along with it.
So because we live in the crazy year of 2024, she then later accused you of sending her flirty texts, which she entered into the congressional record. Can you clear this up for us, Professor?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you wonderful women.
Yes.
The thing is that, let's look at a little background. Mm-hmm. I'm a preacher. So I know sin, my own and others, right? Nobody's perfect. I saw Whoopi yesterday talk about the fact in regard to Janet Jackson, people make mistakes, and we have to acknowledge that. Number two, as a professor, I've seen things evolve over space and time. What you could say 20 years ago, can't say today.
No. Yeah.
Not because you're certainly wrong, but the temper of the times has changed.
Right.
So if you acknowledge a woman's beauty, that is a power imbalance, there's a problem there. But peer-to-peer, a different story. Still cautious, but different. And then thirdly, let's look at the politics. We're living in a toxic culture where there's a cancel culture gotcha. We're not trying to elevate, we're trying to eviscerate. So when it comes to Nancy Mace, you see I tried to be nice to the woman. I said, you're a wonderful woman. I lied. I then said, but I tried to be nice to her. And then even when I pointed out to her what the repetition of the misnaming of Kamala Harris would do, she got defensive. Oh, you're calling me a racist. No.
And you never did. I
never did.
Yeah.
I think Shakespeare said the lady doth protest too much. Or in the hood, we say a hit dog will holler. So the point is that this woman has now depended upon, like her inspiration, Donald Trump, a racist trope. The black brute seeks the innocent white woman, and now I'm seeking lasciviously to approach her. I didn't call her names.
There's so much here. Oh, so you're a preacher. A preacher who's been married multiple times and is married now, but is texting women how gorgeous they are, how good they look together, and send them kissy emojis. And spare me the times have changed over the years and I'm a little older bit. Yeah, 20 years ago, it was still not okay to hit on other women when you're married, bud. Still not okay. And it was especially not okay to do so after you just acted all high and mighty on live TV as if this was the worst person in the world and clearly meant none of it and was clearly just being fake for political pandering or what have you. And exposing your hypocrisy, the fact that what you said as a political commentator on a major news network was actually BS, isn't cancel culture. Nobody's trying to get you fired. Nobody's trying to ruin your life. They're just pointing out that you're a hypocrite and a fraud. That's part of open debate. There's nothing cancel culture about that at all. And then the audacity to try to play the victim and say that they're doing a racist trope against you of a black man coveting a white woman. No, babe, you did the racist trope against you, I guess, because you're a black man and you're hitting up this white woman in her DMs, even though you're married. That's crazy. And you don't get to then play the victim and act like you're being unfairly maligned because of your race. No, babe, facts can't be racist. The texts say what they say. You sent them. This whole saga is just noteworthy to me on a couple of levels. One is just the entertainment value. It's always kind of delicious to see these woke frauds get exposed in 4K and then squirm and try to wriggle their way out of it after they've been highlighted for their hypocrisy and the emptiness of the virtue signaling they engage in and make careers out of. But two, it was more evidence to me of how often this identity politics nonsense gets used as a smokescreen to protect people from bad behavior. So this guy, objectively, regardless of race or anything else, he did some stuff that's bad, right? Hitting on women when you're married, being fake and making alarmist claims on TV that you don't actually mean, and then betraying them with your private communications minutes later. That's not great. It's not good stuff. It's not the end of the world, right? He's not a career criminal or something, but it's slimy behavior. However, he's weaponizing the identity politics, victimization, oppression Olympics to try to essentially shield himself from scrutiny for it. And that's not a one-off incident. It's something we see happening quite a bit. And often these types do that. And it's a real shame, but it's a real shortcoming of that movement that they fail to police their own and they allow their ideology to be used as a shield to protect bad people from accountability. And third, there's just a media angle here. The fact that the View hosts defended this guy and gave him this softball and went along with these obviously ridiculous excuses like cancel culture or like I'm being victimized as a black man as a racist trope without pushing back or exposing, as I just did, how ridiculous and empty those excuses are, it's just pathetic. It's just, and of course now today the View is interviewing President Biden. I don't understand why these unserious people are allowed to occupy such a prime perch in mainstream media. I mean, it's just really, this is why people don't trust you anymore. This is why people think that you're deeply biased and a joke because of stuff like this, because you defend the indefensible. And while they grill the crap out of any Republican that comes on that show, and I'm fine with that, I'm all about scrutiny on politicians and on even advocates and activists, they just give complete softballs to any liberal or progressive. And it's just really sad and kind of pathetic to watch. And it's funny to me because in this whole saga, they really managed to take an issue where I actually think the progressives were kind of more right, though they were being hysterical about it. But like, you should pronounce Kamala Harris's name correctly. We should be courteous to each other. We shouldn't purposefully mispronounce it, which is what Nancy Mace originally said on CNN. And yet, because of their absurd pandering, identity politics, hyperbole, and hypocrisy, the woke people still managed to make themselves out to be the bad guys in this whole story. It's a crazy one that I honestly enjoyed catching up on, so I wanted to share it with you all. So let me know in the comments below what you think of this. Who do you side with in this little brouhaha that happened between the congresswoman and this CNN commentator? Let me know in the comments. And now we've got to check in on Kamala Harris, the vice president and current presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, who just reaffirmed one of her old radical stances in a radio interview. She was asked about the filibuster, which, if you don't know, is a rule that requires most serious, impactful legislation to pass with 60 votes in the Senate rather than a pure majority of just 51 votes out of 100 senators. The filibuster is meant to ensure that policies aren't flip-flopping every 2 years when the elections happen, and that serious consensus is required before large-scale systemic changes happen in our country. But in an interview with Wisconsin Public Radio, Kamala confirmed that she wants to do away with the filibuster in order to enact abortion rights nationwide. Take a listen.
It is well within our reach to hold on to the majority in the Senate and take back the House. And so I would also emphasize that while the presidential election is extremely important and dispositive of where we go moving forward, it also is about what we need to do to hold on to the Senate and win seats in the House. That being said, I've been very clear. I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe, and we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
So this isn't actually a new stance. Harris has said this for several years now, but it is interesting that she affirmed it rather than waffling or not responding as she has with many of her old radical positions now that she's the nominee and has tried to present herself as more moderate. This one she doubled down on and said, yep, I still want to do this. I still want to scrap the filibuster, so just in the Senate, pure majority rule, 51 votes is enough to pass this kind of serious legislation, changing national policies. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think she's totally wrong on the merits. And for a long time, even Democrats could see the importance and necessity of the Senate filibuster. For example, listen to former Senator Joe Biden explain why he supported it for such a long time.
President Lyndon Johnson, the master of the Senate, put it this way: in this country, a majority may govern, but it does not rule. The genius of our constitutional and representative government is the multitude of safeguards provided to protect minority interest. Proponents of the nuclear option argue this proposal is simply the latest iteration of a growing trend toward majoritarianism in the Senate. God save us from that fate if it is true. I strongly disagree. Even a cursory review of these previous changes in the Senate rule on unlimited debate show that these previous mechanisms to invoke cloture always respected minority rights. The nuclear option completely eviscerates minority rights. It is not simply to change in degree, but a change in kind. It is a discontinuous action that is a sea change, fundamentally restricting the Senate and what the Senate's all about.
So it's not too often that I say this, but Joe Biden was completely right. Kamala Harris is being incredibly short-sighted with this naive proposal, because if you just get rid of something like the Senate filibuster to enact your agenda, well, guess what? It's not going to be there in a few years where Republicans take power again and boom, they can do the same thing. They can change nationwide policies with just 51 votes in the Senate. And so while you may like it, and my position on this is totally independent of how you feel about abortion rights and how you feel about the whole debate over Roe v. Wade and all of that, whether you want Roe v. Wade codified at the federal level, set all of that aside for the purposes of this conversation. If Kamala Harris and the Democrats can enact Roe v. Wade nationwide with 51 votes, Republicans can take it away again with 51 votes. So they can do whatever else they want with just 51 votes. So once again, Democrats are being incredibly short-sighted with their political machinations where they undermine systemic checks and balances like the Senate filibuster in pursuit of short-term political gain, and then it's always going to come back to bite them. They're really weakening the things that will actually protect them and their interests when Republicans take power next. So I think it's totally misguided and deeply naive, and you actually have a pretty recent historical example that shows how this ends up backfiring for Democrats and in fact led to the very situation where Roe v. Wade was overturned in the first place. Back in 2013, Democrats were frustrated by the fact that Senate Republicans were blocking President Obama's judicial nominees because there was the filibuster in place for judicial nominees, meaning that you needed 60 votes to get judges approved. Harry Reid, then the Senate Majority Leader, decided to get rid of the judicial filibuster for all federal court positions below the Supreme Court. And then they were able to ram through the Obama nominees without the 60-vote threshold being met. But this opened the Pandora's box of eliminating filibuster protections so that when Trump took office, Senate Leader Mitch McConnell got rid of it entirely, the last remaining bit for Supreme Court nominees. And that is how Trump was able to put on the bench on the Supreme Court Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett without 60 votes because of this process that started when Democrats opened the door and weakened the filibuster in 2013. And then those judges went on to form the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. And yet still, it seems, the Democrats, at least Kamala Harris, haven't learned their lesson and still don't think in the long term. They still just think short-term, tunnel vision, what can I do right now without thinking of the long-term consequences. It's really alarming stuff, and it's so concerning to see an inability among our political leaders to think more than 2 steps ahead when it comes to undermining the checks and balances built into our system. I can't say I'm particularly surprised by the lack of foresight and wisdom that Kamala Harris is showing here, but I'm still disappointed by it nonetheless. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slug slugs.
Today, this woman is encouraging people to divorce their husbands if they support Trump.
I just saw a heartbreaking video of a woman who realized now, 8 years in, that her husband is a Trump supporter. I can't even imagine that. But I would get a divorce immediately, and there are going to be Republicans on the internet that are really mad about this because I'm spreading hate and divisiveness. But, like, I want people to have control over their own bodies. He doesn't. I want women to be able to do whatever they want. He doesn't. He doesn't even want us to be able to vote. I want it to be easier for people to vote in elections. And he said, if you vote this time, you'll never have to do it again. So People who say that it's divisive to think like that politically, I would not be able to live in the same house with someone who had such fundamentally different beliefs. How could you love someone that supports a person who wants to strip you of your rights, that wants you to bleed out in a hospital room rather than giving you the abortion care that you need?
So there's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, I mean, if you're finding out 8 years in, and I know this isn't her, this is another person who was talking about, but if you're finding out 8 years in that your husband is a Trump supporter, there's something wrong here beyond just politics. Like, how did you never discuss this? Did he lie to you for many years? Like, there's a communication or honesty issue there that's actually a problem. But just the political difference itself shouldn't be. And it's actually insane and frankly kind of evil to tell people they should destroy their families and disown their loved ones just because they vote for people at the different ballot box, different people at the ballot box. That is such a totalizing and reductionist worldview that basically says that one part of you determines whether you're a irredeemable human and leaves no room for nuance or complexity or the notion that some issues are actually really complicated, abortion as much as any, and that good people could reach different conclusions in good faith. No room for that, just total black and white view of the world, very childish, good and bad. How could anyone disagree with me on this? They must be evil. There's no other explanation. And some of this is just unhinged. Like, what is she talking about? Trump doesn't want women to vote. He's never said that. He's not opposed to women voting. That's just a weird lie. In the same way, when she talks about how Trump said you'll never have to vote again, she's taking that totally out of context. What he was doing was telling his supporters to show up to the polls this time, and then he'll solve the problems they care about, and he won't really care if they show up next election. He wasn't saying there won't be any more elections, I'll take over. That's just a total distortion and lie based on what he actually said. And I just can't relate to this idea that you can't love somebody who disagrees with you or has different political views. That is so, to me, bleak and just divisive and toxic. People can be complicated. People can have differences of opinion. People can have dimensions to them, some of which you really appreciate profoundly and love, and some of which you don't agree with. And that's okay, but that's part of the human experience. We're not meant to look at each other as black and white NPC automatons like this woman clearly does. This whole rant's also crazy because Trump has actually taken a somewhat moderate position on abortion. He's not a hardcore pro-lifer. In fact, many of the extreme pro-lifers are really upset with him right now because he's come out as pro-IVF. He's come out as against a federal abortion ban, saying leave it to the states so they can all decide. And even in his state, Florida, he's opposed restrictions that are very harsh, very severe restrictions on abortion, wanting to preserve some level of abortion access. And he's always maintained that he supports exceptions for extreme rare outlier cases, the typical exceptions. So obviously, his judges did overturn Roe v. Wade, which then sent abortion policies back to the states. That's something I agree with and think makes sense. But Trump, so you can blame him for that, sure, but his actual position on abortion isn't even extreme pro-life. Even if it was, I mean, you shouldn't divorce your husband for supporting him, but it's all the more delusional when the guy you're so upset about isn't even nearly as extreme on this issue as you're making him out to be. I actually feel bad for this woman because she's closing herself off to a lot of healthy relationships or positive experiences with other people who are different from her because of her narrow-mindedness and toxicity. And if it was just her doing that, at least then it's just affecting her own life, I guess. And I guess it's not the end of the world. But to be going out into the internet and telling people to get divorces for reasons that are ultimately trivial in the scheme of our individual lives is actually really evil and sick stuff. And I am just so disheartened by it. And I really hope people like this stop putting out that toxicity and negativity into the world. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, because that one was a real doozy. And now, I'll wrap up today's show by reading a few of your comments from yesterday's episode. One person writes, the real problem with the journalist is that she ignored the context of Kamala's response, which came after the audience's, including a teen survivor, heartfelt pleas to do something about school shootings. The VP basically ignored them and pivoted to the Second Amendment and her own glee at the prospect of killing a home intruder. Interesting, I haven't seen the context, so I can't actually confirm that. But what I'll just say is the real point I would have liked to see the journalist press on is the fact that Kamala said she supports self-defense, but then has also supported a lot of gun control policies. And that would actually be an inconsistency there. But there, again, I have no issue with what she said about killing a home intruder. I think most people would agree that's common sense. Around and find out. Another person says, us straight guys have had this joke where we say we're lesbians forever. Now actual straight guys claiming to be women are using it seriously. The world is a joke. Yes, the world is increasingly a joke, and unfortunately, so is the LGBT community, and that is just really upsetting to me. Another person said, I always thought I was a lesbian trapped in a man's body. Now I realize I'm just a straight man. Thank you. You know, it's just funny. These people, they are jokes come to life, some of them at least. It's really wild. Another person says, I think I'm starting to experience hair envy watching Brad's videos. That's some thick, luxurious, healthy-looking hair. Thank you, I guess. But it's funny because other people were commenting, insulting my hair and saying it looked bad yesterday. So y'all are, apparently my hair is divisive and divides opinions too. I guess everything about me has to. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button to reward my suffering, and do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, and I take the time to respond to each episode to a few of them. And if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely read it on the show. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.